We're live. We're going to see you. Hi, everyone. We are officially live. And so we're live online as well. Thank you so much for joining us online. We really appreciate that. I hope everything goes well, because we can't change anything on the fly. So we're going to, Kendal, what are you starting things off with?
All right, so my name's Kendal Land. I'm the pastor at First Presbyterian Church, and two doctors and a priest walk into a bar. No, wait, that's the other way around. Two priests and a doctor. We're not starting that way. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the realities about COVID-19, some of the realities about how we can help to stem the spread of it, about what's happening in our healthcare system here in Longview. Especially, we have a wonderful guest who Mike's going to introduce Dr. Walgama to you here in a minute. And what we're going to do is, it's a little different tonight. Ordinarily, we have three clergy up here who each present a different point of view on something. But tonight, we're going to be more of an interview style. And so Mike and I are going to interview Dr. Walgama, and she's going to give us some amazing answers to probably some not very good questions, but we trust her to provide all of the intelligence to the conversation, so this works out well. And we'll kind of follow a similar format to our schedule of normally, in that after we do those questions, we'll take a little break, and we've got our index cards that we'll pass out. If y'all have any questions that you want to ask Dr. Walgama, y'all visit for a little bit, grab another beer, relax a little bit, and then we'll come back together. And maybe we'll give you some questions to discuss as well. And we'll come back together then and answer any questions that y'all have that you turned in on your index cards. And just as a friendly reminder, because we are here at Theology on Tap, but one of the things that we try to model here is how to have civic discourse, how we can talk to one another while disagreeing with one another, but still respecting one another. So again, our motto is, it's okay to disagree, it's not okay to disrespect. And if you're not really sure what that means, on your tables, you've got these little tent cards that have sort of some good guidelines for what that looks like. And if you're worried that what you're saying might be disrespectful, maybe take a break, go get another beer, and then think about it, and then try it again.
Those are the things to write down.
Yeah, those are the things to write down.
Write it
That's
down,
right.
Get your neighbor to look at it first.
Right.
And then go from there.
That's right. Because one of the good things, if you do write it down in a disrespectful way, Mike and I can edit it for you without you knowing it. So it works out.
We're the last line of defense. And just know that if we don't ask your question, it's because we thought it was that way.
It's
100% personal.
It's not what it is at all. That's not it. All right. Well, that's pretty much all I've got. Any questions from y'all about how this is going to flow? If not, then turn it over to Mike.
Okay. So tonight is something we're really excited to do. We love having the occasional guest on the panel because it adds some expertise to the things that we're talking about. So often we can kind of default to getting in the weeds on theological things. Coming up for air like this, particularly when things are especially difficult in our world, just kind of makes sense. So we reached out to our local healthcare community, and Dr. Alison Walgama was kind enough to sit on the panel and ask some questions. She okayed most of them, all of them, and is very happy to walk through and just have a conversation with us this evening. So, Doctor, would you like to get us rolling? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Probably not. Test. Okay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So I am a family medicine physician at Diagnostic Clinic over across from Longview Regional Emergency Room. I am primary care, and I see ages 12 and up. Most of what I see is older adults, actually, with chronic conditions like hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, chronic lung disease, things like that. And then a lot of my practice is also preventative medicine. We in primary care try to focus as much as we can on prevention. So that's mostly what I do. And then lately, mostly what I do is seems like it's COVID related, but we'll get into that more later. I also work at Alpine Compassion Clinic, which is a ministry clinic to the uninsured here in Longview, and that's over at Alpine Church of Christ.
All right, well, Mike is playing around with our audiovisual equipment over there. So thank you, first of all, for agreeing to be with us and taking time out of what I am sure is probably one of the busiest schedules you've had in your life, I would imagine right now.
Okay, go ahead. It's okay. Sorry. It's okay.
Yeah, you're right. It has been very, very busy lately.
Okay, just hold it closer to your mouth there.
Test.
I promise, we're all professionals. We know exactly what we're doing.
We're missing Steve Newcomb right now.
Yeah, we really are. Steve, if you're out there paying attention, just could you send us a text message about how we're supposed to handle this? But while Mike's playing around with that, if you start having some feedback, we'll trade microphones.
Okay,
that's okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted you to share with us, if you could, being that it is kind of probably a busier time than you've ever spent in a season of medicine in your life, what are some of the big differences you've seen, not necessarily in the world, not in the news, but just in what you have been experiencing in your life in medicine over the past 18 months?
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So I know you guys watch the news, but when the COVID first came, things were a lot different for us. We had to work outside a lot because we saw sick patients outside, kind of in the full garb that you would see on the news. And then, just like a lot of you may have been staying at home, we were encouraging our patients to stay at home, so we had to switch to telehealth a lot, and so that was a big change for us because I had really never done telehealth before. And it's less than ideal for a lot of things, but we made it work. And then kind of as the pandemic rolled on, we kind of saw a drop in COVID cases and then a rise around Christmas, and things became really busy then. It was the first time in my career that everybody seemed to be sick with the same thing. And so that was really different and made us busy. And then after that, dropped off a little bit, like around February or so. Then there was kind of the hope of the vaccination and the optimism that came with that. And then as the summer rolled on, everything was going good and things were seeming like we were going to get back to seeing patients in person more. And then in late June, we started noticing more and more people calling sick, and then more and more positive COVID cases. And so we kind of knew then that it was probably back on the rise. And so ever since then, it's been kind of like a whirlwind for what I normally do. There's just a lot of people calling that they're sick, and it's difficult. It's difficult to talk to everybody, and you want to give everybody plenty of time because some people are very scared, and they, obviously want advice from us, and there's really limited things that we can do for people in the outpatient world, but we can reassure them about certain things and tell them how to try to prevent certain things and tell them what equipment to get at home and things like that. So I think it's just adapting to something that we've never done before. I mean, all of us are doing that in our own jobs.
So we also are in a world where we watch trends a lot and try to kind of work on programming around those trends and stuff, and what is reasonable at specific times and stuff. And so we went through the anxiety riddled, okay, what is COVID going to look like long term? What is that going to do in the world of the local church and things like that? And what are some of the things that we need to do to just be wise and faithful? I can't tell you how many times I heard that during a season when it came to reopening and engaging and providing services during that season. And that's a topic that I do want to touch on specifically in earnest before we're done with our conversation. But it seems like there's been such a radical shift. What's been the difference, like there in June, kind of to where we are now? What's been the big change with COVID and all that? If you can explain that.
Yeah, well, the Delta variant is just very much more virulent. So we're seeing more people be infected than with the first major spike. And so I think that, and then there's the home test. There's a lot more availability of testing now, and so you don't always have to come to your doctor to get tested, which actually is nice for us, because that's just when, you know, we can focus on actually treating people or talking or treating people who have disease versus trying to get everybody who's sick tested. So that's definitely been a major difference.
So with where we are now, you know, if you're putting your bedside manner hat on and counseling some concerned people, if we can start to kind of walk down that road, the pearls of wisdom to those who, you know, like to occasionally get out about in public and meet under a roof together. What are some of the things that, you know, you would say to, you know, be wise and faithful about?
Yeah. So me too. I mean, I was excited to be able to see my patients again in the office and get out and do things with my family and stuff like that. So definitely know that. I think there's, you know, everything is kind of like a layer of protection. There's no like one thing that's perfect. So I think however many layers you put up, you're kind of protecting yourself from the virus more and more. Obviously, I think right now the biggest layer of protection that we have is the vaccine. We're seeing that in our hospitals right now. We're seeing that the people in our hospitals are largely unvaccinated. The people doing poorly are largely unvaccinated. I'm seeing that in my own practice. I've probably had 50 to 60 Delta cases in the past 3 months, and I think I've had 4 of them be vaccinated. And that may be skewed somewhat, because even if you do get it and are vaccinated, your symptoms may be such that you don't call your doctor. So there may be some bias in that data, but yeah, in general. And then so that vaccination is probably the biggest layer that we can cover ourselves with, especially for this variant. And we're hoping that, you know, the vaccine produces a robust enough immunity that it really can target some different variants as they are kind of thrown our way. But that's really yet to be determined. I mean, we don't really know what's around the corner with the different variants, unfortunately. But then mask also, I think, you know, anytime you're talking loudly, singing, you're spewing, you know, sneezing, coughing, obviously you're spewing obvious small particles of spit or saliva and respiratory droplets, and that's how COVID is transmitted. So it seems pretty obvious to me that covering that up and putting that kind of blockade against those large particles of spew, so to say, would be at least one way that we could kind of prevent that from going on. And I think in a time when there's a high spread of the virus, like right now, even if you're vaccinated, you should consider wearing a mask because, like I was mentioned earlier, I mean, if I got COVID vaccinated, my symptoms may be such that I just think that I have allergies or something like that, and then I might be able to transmit it, especially all day long talking within 6 feet of about 20 people. So that's why I wear a mask, even vaccinated. And then the third layer, is social distancing, I think, which is still, obviously, I have a lot of older patients who still don't get out of the house very much, and I don't probably need to worry about them too much. So I think it's just all about the layers.
Sure.
And but then you have to balance that too. I think it's important for me to mention mental health. So balancing how you're protecting yourself versus how is your mental health, and what you need to boost up your mental health and what you need to, and it's different for everybody.
Okay, I got a couple questions with that. All right, so Mike and I are pastors, and so that means that even though everyone today thinks they're an expert on everything, we are exceptionally bad at that because people listen to us talk. And so obviously we know everything that we're talking about is what we think all the time. Mike more than me. But so there are some things I will admit that I don't completely understand about how the vaccination works and about how masks work. So we'll start with the masks first because it's probably an easier question, and then maybe we can talk a little bit more about a specific question I have about the vaccines. So with masks, from what I hear you're saying, we should wear masks not to keep ourselves safe, but to keep others safe?
That's right.
Okay.
For the most part. Now, like if me and you are talking this close and I'm kind of like yelling at you, or you're yelling at me, then obviously my mask is somewhat protecting me from your spit particles too. So it may go both ways.
I do spit when I talk too.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. I'm good. So, yeah, I think, but for the most part, it's keeping your saliva or respiratory droplets contained and not out there. And I mean, obviously, a cloth mask is only protecting the large, So it's just it's just another layer of protection.
So it would be kind of like, when we teach our kids to sneeze, we tell them to sneeze into their elbows or their hands, or to block what's coming out, not to block what's coming in.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you still need to wash your hands and all that stuff, right?
Oh, you're right.
So,
yeah, we've got to teach our kids that, but we're working on that. Yeah. Well, that's another good point. I mean, like with the social distancing, so hand washing and sanitizing, that's still important, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my kind of geeky question about the vaccine.
Okay.
All right, and I will probably get it wrong, so please feel free to correct me, Mike, but then we'll let the expert actually correct both of us. So my understanding about the way this vaccine is made is that it's very different from the way we've made vaccines in the past. So vaccines in the past, we would get like a piece of the illness, and we would inject a piece into a person, not to make them sick, but to give them enough of a focus for our own bodies to fight against this and develop antibodies.
Right.
But that's not how this vaccine works, right? Is that correct?
That's right. It's very similar, though. I think it's helpful to go back and remember what happens when a virus attacks us. So any virus, whether it's COVID or flu or whatever, the virus enters our body and actually attaches itself to our cells and injects its cell material into our cell material. And then our cells start replicating the virus in our bodies. So that's how a virus attacks us, regardless of the vaccine. Okay. So this vaccine comes and it attaches to our cell, and I'm talking about the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and the Moderna. Attaches itself to our cell wall, injects the mRNA into our cells, and that mRNA then makes little spike protein codes for little spike proteins to be produced on our cells. And the spike proteins look a lot like COVID spike proteins. And so then our body is like, oh, well, we don't like spike proteins because they're not normal. And then so we start making all these antibodies to come and attack spike protein. And so then our body knows what to do. Our body has all these antibodies made to the spike protein. So our body knows what to do when COVID comes in with all of its spike proteins. And then those antibodies come and attach themselves to the spike proteins on the COVID and kind of neutralize it, so to say. If you haven't gone, I hesitate saying this, but if you go on YouTube,
You heard it here. The doctor said, go to YouTube.
there is a good video by Harvard about how mRNA vaccines work. And the reason I say it's good is because it has basically a picture, a video.
Does that have animation?
Yeah.
I do well with animation. This is good.
Yeah.
Kendal needs help on that level.
So a video of everything that I just said that may be foreign to you if you not have a science background. I don't know.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
And
if it wasn't, I'm gonna pretend like it was. So I don't sound like I'm an idiot. Yeah.
He's going to YouTube later.
But Johnson & Johnson is less effective at preventing disease than the Pfizer and the Moderna. But it actually works similarly. It's just not using mRNA. It's just using another virus to insert into our cells to do the exact same thing. And then a lot of people wonder, like, what happens to the mRNA after it gets into our cells? It's the same thing that happens to when we get infected with a virus, and that virus puts its DNA into our cells. It just degrades over time.
So I know what mRNA is. Some people, like Mike, probably don't. So could you explain that to him? I would explain it, but I don't want to sound like I'm taking over the show here. So if you would explain, that'd be great.
He does have an expert complex.
Okay, so yeah, this is taking me way back to
You're doing a great
days.
job.
I am a clinician now. I don't study science all the time. But anyway, so it's a messenger piece of protein, basically, that codes for something in our cells in order, like a message to make something. So that's really all it is. You can think of it kind of like DNA, except it's just a message protein.
Okay. Cool.
That's super helpful.
All right, let's see. So we've got a few other questions here that we've got kind of planned in advance before we get into break time and whatever may come our way. So one of the things that we try to do when we've been asked our thoughts about this pandemic, whatever, as leaders in the faith community, one of the things that I heard you talk about, and what we try to do is talk about the importance of mental health. And so one of the things that we try to talk about is, are there good things that are coming out of this experience? Now, obviously, we all have known, I'll wager, we all know people who have been infected by this disease, people whose bodies have been ravaged by this disease, whose families have been broken by these diseases. I mean, one of the things that we struggle with in churches is that we have people who have passed away and we haven't been able to gather to mourn their passing. But in the midst of all that, is there something that we can look at as something good that we can gain from this experience? And with that, what is something for you personally, if you don't mind me asking, that you have found that you needed to be life-giving during these really difficult times? So it's a two-part question. What could be good out of it, and then what for you personally has been life-giving?
So as far as what can be good out of it, I think I've seen a lot more patients come to grips with their mental health, whereas before we very commonly see that that's shoved kind of under the rug and not talked about. And I feel like a lot more patients are being more open about their stress or their struggles or their struggle with the divisiveness that's in our country, the anxiety surrounding the media. That's been a big thing. I've never really prescribed people to turn off their TV, but I found that helpful in a lot of cases, or stop looking at social media. And then I also think that just speaking from my world, it's definitely brought the healthcare community closer together, working together in a way that we never really done before, and just being there for each other, our mental health, and the camaraderie that comes around a struggle. And so those are the good things that I've seen from it. And then just a closer relationship with my patients too. You know, I've never lost so many people in 1 year, and we all feel like that. I mean, not just me, but there's a lot of people that, you know, I care about that are really sick right now, with the same thing, and that's just never been something that we've had to deal with, and so it's been life-giving to me to just be thankful that my patients trust my advice and come to me for advice, despite everything that's going on in the world. I love it when a patient makes an appointment to talk about the vaccine, and we've had a lot of that, you know, and so that's great. I mean, I want to have those opportunities to live life out through a relationship and not through something, you know, you read on social media or see on the news or something like that. Back when COVID first came around, and we were staying at home more, that was a great time for my family and myself. You know, thank God thus far I haven't had anyone in my close family, you know, become very sick from COVID. So I enjoyed that time of just being together and getting to spend time with my kids and not worrying about having to go to games and practices and after school activities and stuff like that. So that was really nice. And then I think also anytime that there's something that creates tension or struggle in my job, I always try to unify with the person on whatever level that I can. And with a lot of my patients, you know, I find that unity in Christ and just knowing that, you know, we have the same creator, we have the same forgiver, redeemer, and a lot of times it kind of ends there. Like, that's the only unity that we can find. We can't agree on the vaccine. They don't want to wear a mask in my office. So I try to go back to that a lot. And this is another opportunity for me to remember that is important. So.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so just going to follow up with that. I imagine the burden that you feel. I can only imagine the totality of that burden that you feel. Talking about mental health, and how do you keep your head on straight? Because people coming to you for answers and for help and all that. You voice, you've never lost so many people in a year before and all that. How are you doing, and how are you doing that? Like that those just seem absolutely just huge in my mind. So if I can ask those two questions, how do you keep going?
Well, I think I already kind of mentioned one part of it was my colleagues, just sharing things that we've never really shared before. It's been very helpful. And then also, it kind of sounds weird to say it, but I'm just going to say it. I'm a member of a Facebook group of physicians, and that group has been super helpful just to kind of know that it's not just here. You know, I mean, we know that because we see it in the news, but just to see, you know, just to share in your struggle is always helpful. It also helps having a physician husband, definitely. I can't leave that one out. Just to kind of share in the different struggles. And I think just, you know, taking time and for my own mental health, I kind of prioritized that about 5 years ago. And, you know, for such a time as this, I guess, because had this happened to me before, then it may have been a little bit different world for me. So I think just, you know, the stage of life that you're in and what you've been through and what your experiences have been, garner that. So.
So I've got one last question for you, then we're going to take a little break. That sound about right, Mike?
Sounds about right.
Okay, so one of the questions that is important for us to ask in this group is, like everyone else, we've been trying to figure out what's the best protocol to follow in our place where we live and work. And for us, those are our places of worship. So if you had some recommendations that you could give to a church or to any worshiping body, so where people are gathering together, where they're singing and speaking loudly and doing all these wonderful things and wanting to hug and kiss on each other and all that kind of stuff, what would your recommendation be as to how we could do that as safe as possible to help protect not only our physical and our emotional, but also our spiritual health?
So most of the things just reflect what we've already talked about. If you're, the more people in a building that are vaccinated, probably the less spread of the virus that's going to go around, so the safer the environment's going to be. But then, making a safe place for those who don't feel like they're ready for the vaccine or don't want to be vaccinated for whatever reason. So, masks could be helpful too, especially with the singing. I think that there's been a couple studies lately that show that masks, they've mostly been in schools, but masks really do reduce the spread of the virus. So, I heard a lot of rhetoric early in the pandemic about, well, we don't have any data on masks and all this. Well, I think we do now. And so, in a place where you're constantly spewing, respiratory droplets like singing, then I think masking is a good idea. And then, there's the distancing aspect of it too. If you can spread your rows out in your church, then I think that's helpful. I'm sure your churches provide like tele.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's helpful, especially because we do have, a lot of my older patients, they just don't want to go anywhere still. And so I like the fact that a lot of things, even like this, we can recommend, well, you can still be social, at least you can, watch it on your computer or whatever. So.
Yeah. I think it's break time.
Yeah, so we're going to take a break, and before we take a break, I'm going to say something kind of really inane that doesn't matter, giving Mike and Dr. Walgama a chance to come up with a question that they might want to have for y'all to ponder while we take our break. But one of the things that I heard Dr. Walgama talk about when it came to mental health and taking a break from your television, there's a really great song by one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, who was actually one of the earliest victims of COVID, John Prine, called Spanish Pipe Dream. If you don't know that, Doyle might be the only one who knows it here, but if you don't know that, I would highly recommend that you spend some time listening to Spanish Pipe Dream and just enjoying the beauty of John Prine and blowing up the TV. All right. So y'all got a question for the crowd to think about?
Yeah, I think so. Naturally, I kind of come back around to COVID in churches and things like that. So especially if you're sitting at a table with people that you don't worship with on Sunday morning, maybe compare notes about what churches have done over the course of things and stuff, and talk about what seemed reasonable, what frustrated you. Maybe talk about why those things seemed reasonable and why those things frustrated you, and have some dialogue around that, because that's something that we're passionate about, are curious. It's not going away anytime soon, and so yeah, just love to sit in on some of those conversations. So that would be one thing for sure. Anything in particular?
Well, when I was thinking about the question, what kept coming to my mind was kind of like your question is like directed towards your line of work. My question is, what do you expect of your healthcare provider or a healthcare system in this time? Like, what are your expectations of what we should be doing or not doing?
Okay.
Those are great. All right, so share with each other if you're not in the same place of worship, either what your place of worship has been like or places you've heard about or seen about to see what it's like. Share what your expectations are of your healthcare provider, which I think that is huge for us all to be on the same page about that. And one of the things that we asked Dr. Walgama to share with us, maybe y'all can share with each other, what have you found in this crazy time that has been life-giving for you? Maybe we can learn some of that from each other as well. So we'll be back together in about, what, 15, 20 minutes?
Let's say 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So write down your cards or pass them out.
Cards are there by the water.
If you're watching us online and you happen to have Mike's phone number, he'll be glad to give it to you if you don't.
No, goodness no. Write it in the comments online, either Facebook or my YouTube channel, but there's no reason to follow my YouTube channel because it's just past Theology on Taps.
So wherever, that's all the reason to follow the YouTube channel. What are you talking about?
Or
we're right up there with Harvard and the mRNA animation series, man. It's awesome.
We are trending.
We are. So yeah, so leave us some comments online. We would appreciate that, and then we'll get the note cards passed out. Thank y'all.
Hey there, how are you?
No, whenever the first wave COVID came,
No, it's not my
I
know, I agree.
Make some more shirts.
Make some more shirts. Okay, I'll have to work with our wonderful friends here at the Oil Horse and make a very special new Oil Horse branded Theology on Tap t-shirt. And it'll be fantastic. We will sell single digits and give dozens away as we typically do. So that's the way that works. If you're still writing your questions, please, you can bring those up at any time. We've got a couple of cards. Kendal has them, and we will let him ask them.
I don't see how this applies to me. Surely not.
Well, it's probably not that card then.
Can't be.
It's the one behind it.
Oh, the one that says Kindle. Yeah, gotcha. I have a good answer for that one.
It's a side effect.
Yeah, it is not. It's not. All right, so can you please talk a bit about HIPAA? And so this kind of gets a little interesting between a doctor and a pastor. Who can know what and how much can be shared with congregants or teachers when information is willingly shared from COVID positive person? While you are thinking about that, so like every day, it seems like I have a phone call and a voicemail from Longview Independent School District telling us that one or more students has been lab confirmed tested positive for COVID-19. And granted, they don't tell us who it was, they don't go into all of that, but I mean, that's kind of the first step of that question. So how far can you go with sharing information about someone? And probably another part of that question would be like, are there special exceptions during a pandemic? I mean, I don't know.
So I can speak to kind of what we're doing at our church right now when it comes to sharing information. So we don't spam or blow up people during the week. They typically get 2 emails from the church. The first one is kind of like a general announcement. Hey, these are things going on. We've been telling you for weeks to sign up for this thing. It's actually going to happen, so please sign up. So there's that email. And then the other one is our prayer email. And so that goes out as well. And so whenever someone ends up kind of on that specific list, there's a lot of communication with that person. There's never hearsay on that thing we send out. And if someone lands on that particular list with COVID, it's like, no, I have COVID and I really want you to pray. Or their loved one says, no, they have COVID. They ain't doing well. Please, please, please pray for them. So that's kind of where we land on that. There always has to be kind of like an open door there. There has to be permission granted and given and all that. And once that has been, we share that because they say, hey, share this about me.
Yeah. I don't know the legal aspects of like the stuff that you guys are talking about, but
if it makes you feel better, we don't either.
Yeah.
We just gotta make it up as we go.
Yeah. But I think the overarching thing in this conversation is for you guys to know from my perspective that COVID is everywhere right now. So it doesn't matter if somebody in your child's class has it. I can almost guarantee you that someone in your child's class or in your Sunday school class or sitting in the proximity of you at church has it. And so I think we sometimes kind of lose sight of that, especially like in one of these really big peaks. As far as I'm concerned, in my career, I mean, in my job, I can't, there's not much I can say about, you know, I sometimes struggle even talking to family members about how a COVID patient is doing, because, you know, I've never met the family member before. I'm not sure that the patient would want me sharing any information, and so it can be very difficult.
So, can you say the first part of your answer again? Because I thought that was really important and really good. Like, make sure everyone is paying attention to what you just said. I thought that was great.
Hear ye, hear ye.
Yeah, pay attention. This is good. This is good.
Yeah, so I just, at this time, right now, we are in a very high spread environment anywhere we go. There's a very high likelihood that somebody in this room has COVID. whether they ever, are going to show symptoms or not, if we tested everybody in here, even regardless of false positives, there'd probably be somebody in here who had it. So, and I mean, it could be me. So it could be any of us. That's how high the spread is right now. Yeah.
Hey, Kendal, why don't we invite a doctor to sit 3 feet from us?
Is this gonna be a riddle or just like it's a bad idea?
I'm still not seeing sick patients in my office.
Yeah.
By the way.
Okay, that's I feel better about that now.
Yeah, but what if you're the person who has COVID? I mean, still.
Anyway, okay, so.
You want me to read the other question that's on this over here for me?
You're welcome to.
I'm gonna have to edit this one a little bit because even though we are in a bar, I don't know who's watching online. My mom might be watching. There's no telling. She's probably not, but possible. And I know this one's for me because it says Kendal, as though this was like a direct message. Yeah, I really can't edit it. It really has to go straight. Yeah. Did you write this?
No.
Oh, okay. That's even funnier.
I really didn't. Before he says it out loud, I really didn't write this.
Dear Kendal, has COVID made you a jackass, or have you always been that way? So for the record, yes.
He's always been this way.
I've always been that way. I did have COVID. It did give me some really weird side effects, but I was actually much nicer while I had COVID because I didn't talk to anybody. It was really great.
Less collateral Kendal damage.
Yeah, good way to describe it. That's right.
He was taken out of circulation for a week and a half.
Kendal, we love you.
Oh, that's so nice.
We love you just the way you are.
Do you know, my wife bought me a magnet one time. There's this beautiful picture of Jesus, and it's like the typical Euro Jesus where he's got the long, blonde, flowing hair, and the robes, he's got his hands out, and it says, Jesus loves you, but everyone else thinks you're an asshole. So, again, sorry, Mom, if you're watching. And that was my loving wife who gave me that. Just saying.
Yeah. We all like your wife. With our world today is especially connected. We're using the connection right now based on social media and whatnot. Information, absolute overload. I'm curious about this personally. I would love to hear actually from both of you guys on this. How do you filter information these days? What are like reliable sources, or you would consider reliable sources that you're going to get like meaningful and like helpful information on COVID and treatment paths and all that kind of stuff? It just seems like things are crazy and polarized. What's something hopeful when it comes to an information stream that we might be able to find in our world today?
Look at me. I'm a jackass, but only in
So, I mean, it sounds cliche, but for me, we're given authority in our lives for a reason, I believe, and those authorities always take the biggest hits. And so for us, we have always trained to go to the CDC and the NIH for our guidelines, and they're very conservative organizations and I don't mean politically, but I just mean in the fact that they only put out information that they've really sifted through very well, and so they're not going to okay something that's kind of out there or hasn't, had a whole lot of data behind it. And that frustrates people. It frustrates us sometimes, especially right now, whenever it's like, well, there's all these things that might be helpful. Could you please just tell us it's okay to try them, because meanwhile, we're sitting here watching, a lot of people get really sick and die. So there's that aspect too. But then we have to balance that with what we know, which is some of those things can be harmful. And so we made an oath to do no harm. And so we have to balance all of that. So.
Yeah, I remember specifically the conversation, early on in the pandemic about hydroxychloroquine, which is a malaria drug. And going on mission trips and stuff, and Kendal, you can probably relate to this as well. Like taking that they'll, you know, sometimes you're kind of given the warning. Now, if you have a bad reaction to this, the only thing worse than malaria is hydroxychloroquine. When it comes to, like, you know, some of the side effects, and like if you just have a bad reaction to it, your body doesn't like it, and you know you're going to be laid up for your time there. And you know there are things like that. So, and again, like, and I imagine you probably would direct also to those same sources. I imagine you would also say talk to your doctor, and that's a big deal. Like I find myself in a season of life where I am probably just coming out of that bulletproof existence of the 20s and early 30s. I don't have like my doctor, you know what I'm saying? I don't have someone who's like, you know, Mike, we had that conversation when you were 30, or we had that conversation when you were 35, and all. I don't have that person there. So I imagine you would say, okay, that's probably not a good situation, Mike. You need to find someone that you can talk with. But the whole idea of the things that we see online, also because I'm a white male in my 30s, I listened to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. He was all about ivermectin and things like that as part of his treatment.
Did he go like raid a vet store for his ivermectin? Because that was bad.
He did not.
That's good.
He did not. He worked with his doctor. So with things like that, there are stuff out there. You know, what would your counsel be? I think I know what it is. But what would your counsel be with some of those things that are out there?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you go to if you were to what we call doctor shop, okay, enough doctors in this community, and you wanted an ivermectin prescription, you would probably find it pretty easy.
Sure.
And I've prescribed ivermectin in this pandemic, so I'm not doing it anymore based on CDC guidance, but there's been a point where I did that. So things change all the time, and we prescribe meds off-label all the time. So we have to gauge what our level of comfort is with the medication, with the side effects. What is the CDC saying about how effective this is? So all those things. And so you're going to find different opinions. And so I think that is why it is so important to have somebody that you can talk that out through in a relationship.
So this you said something there I think is kind of interesting. You talked about how the guidelines change. You know, and I think that one of the things that I've heard from people who are reticent to accept the guidelines from the authorities is that they obviously don't know what they're talking about because they're going to change, or because things have changed in the past. Like, how do you respond to that? I mean, because it sounds like you've been trained and learned how to deal with this. I'm sure you've seen guidelines on everything change while you've been practicing medicine. So how do you respond to that?
The best way that I can say it is, this is new to us too, you know? So that it would be, if it didn't change, then we would have the answer. You know, we would have known. So that's, science never happens like in a moment's time. You know, you have to build up data to support different hypotheses. And so we learn as we go. And we understand that, but the general public, I think, wants like a specific answer, and that's just not how most things in medicine work. You know, we have to get to a conclusion, and sometimes we kind of struggle to get there.
Yeah, I think about the converse with that, and I definitely am. I'm so sympathetic to your particular situation, but I'm glad you're in that situation, because I think about the other side of that. If essentially the entire world was told, just wait, we're not going to try to fast track anything. We're going to go through the typical very long periods of time of development that we've had in the past and all that. We're not going to give you any information along the way, as you know, independent studies and research is kind of been doing. No, I think the alternative is so much better. Even if it causes some frustration, we have something to go on, at least, whether it be, even if it's just for a day, we have a thing to go on, even if that thing changes tomorrow. So.
Yeah, we wouldn't have the vaccine if that was the case. And we have Regeneron right now, which is working very well for our patients in the outpatient setting.
What is that exactly?
It's an IV infusion that you take if you're COVID positive, mainly in this community. If you have certain risk factors, can you get it? Smith County just set up a infusion center where pretty much anybody who's COVID positive can call. They don't even have to have a doctor's order. They just call and provide proof of positive COVID. And if you are over 12 and weigh over 88 pounds, you can get the infusion. And so that's proving very beneficial in trying to keep patients out of the hospital.
So is that the infusion that's made based on antibodies from other people's blood? Is that what you're
No,
on?
that's a convalescent plasma.
Okay, that's convalescent plasma. Okay.
And that's only indicated for people who are in the hospital. So I'm talking about a treatment.
Like this is keeping you from getting to the hospital.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm out of the cards.
I got more questions though. Can I ask more questions?
You can ask 2 more questions.
All right, 2 more questions. All right,
That's it.
I promise they won't be hard. Obviously, none of them have been hard thus far. I'm not a very good asker of questions. Question asker.
Interviewer.
Right, that's what I am. Not good at. That's it.
So doing great.
Well, I kind of want to take this. I mean, you are obviously a person of faith, and this is Theology on Tap. And so my gut tells me is that when you are talking to people about taking good safety precautions with COVID-19, when you are talking to them about the vaccines, you kind of have to talk to them at some point as a doctor and as a scientist. So for those of us who aren't doctors and scientists, but for those of us who are people of faith, who are very obviously concerned about what's happening in this world today, like what is some language or some guidance that you can give us as a person of faith? How can we respond to the stresses, the anxieties, the whatever that we are confronting every day as a person of faith with limited aspects of knowledge? Does that make sense?
So this sounds very basic and something that you guys know, but I always just fall back on just keeping the relationship with the person, trying to understand their point of view, being, just kind of stating my, the scientific, what I feel like is the scientific fact, the scientific data, but not necessarily shoving it, in their face, and just trying to be receptive to their concern, and then answering those questions in the best way that I can. But some people aren't even asking the questions. Some people are very closed to the science behind it all. So I just try to maintain that relationship so that the door is always open. Because to me, I've seen so many doctors close off those doors, and that person never comes back for advice. So it's very basic, but I mean, I think that's how I deal with it, and not just with COVID, but in all of this.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So in other words, like maybe it's okay to disagree with people, but don't disrespect them, that type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So sorry, how do you get that? Sorry. But one more thing that I think you said earlier that I also think is really important, and I'm curious if you're the anomaly or if everyone can experience this. You said that you have quite a few appointments with your patients where they're just asking you about the vaccine. Like they're not necessarily sick, they're not coming in to get a vaccine shot, they just want to know something else about the vaccine. Are you the anomaly in that, or do other doctors in the area, do they take the time to meet with their patients if they call and say, I'm concerned, I don't know what to do, what do you think I can do? Do you think other doctors in the area are taking that time as well?
Yes. There are a good number of primary care doctors in this town who are really good people, and they are more than welcome to sit down and discuss anything like that with the patient. We're begging people to have those conversations. I mean, I watched the just the other day, the news conference from like the 1st of August popped up on my Facebook feed, where all the local ICU doctors were asking people, have this conversation with your doctor. So we have to be available for that. Sure, I mean, there's going to be rotten eggs out there, so to say, who may kind of brush you off or not want to have
Also
that
amongst
conversation.
No idea what you're talking about, Mike. There are no rotten eggs among pastors. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay,
He's being a rotten egg.
I was just going to say, like, to me, if your primary care doctor doesn't want to have a conversation about the vaccine with you, then it might be time to get a new primary care doctor.
You've heard it here, people.
That's right. And I think that's really important. I just kind of want to everybody to hear that. So you said two really important things right there. Stay in a relationship and talk to your primary care doctor. So we all have friends who are not in the vaccine. You can't convince me otherwise. Call your primary care doctor. Call your doctor. Call any doctor and talk to them about
Have
that.
a discussion about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, especially right now, we can't spend 30 minutes talking about the vaccine. But at least, I mean, I can spend 15, and that's how long my appointment slots are, and I mean, so I can do that.
That's great. Any other questions?
Nope. I also think that's great, and I think there are no more questions. Oh, wait, one more.
What's your biggest holdup? They just don't want getting the vaccine. Nothing that I can do to get them to do.
So this is a good question. I'm going to say it on the microphone so everybody can hear. Is that okay? The question is, what is the biggest hold up for people keeping them from getting the vaccine? And some people, they're just not going to get it into the story. That's it.
Yeah, that is a percentage of people for sure. The number one thing that I hear is there's not enough studies. There's not any long-term data. And my answer to that is there's a really high risk of getting COVID right now, and then there's a fairly high risk of getting really sick from COVID right now. And we have 18 months of data on that. That's all we can have. And you don't want to have long-term COVID. And that's if you even make it out of the hospital if you're in that category that does bad. So there are significant risks with not getting the vaccine. And so I think most of those people, I feel like they don't understand that, and it's our job to kind of say, well, we're seeing these amounts of people on a daily basis. Maybe you're not, but we're dealing with it, and so this is what's going on with COVID versus what you're concerned about with the vaccine.
Do we have any other questions? All right. Mike?
I think it's been a good night.
Dr. Walgama, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome to join us anytime. And we will be back at the first Tuesday of next month. I'm not sure what we're talking about. Mike and I are throwing some ideas around.
It's going to be contentious, and Kendal and I are going to argue.
And then there are going to be people on the panel as well. We'll just be arguing out there with y'all.
Out there.
That's right.
The people.
And thank you to the Oil Horse for hosting us once again. We are so glad. And thank y'all for coming. And we finished a lot early, so grab another beer and support the Oil Horse, and we'll see you next month. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.